Jonathan Blake was a man who lived his life by rules. A billionaire by the age of 40, he had built his empire with hard work and strict decisions. He was a private man, who trusted very few people. His large mansion sat on a quiet hill, surrounded by tall trees and guarded gates. Inside, everything was perfect, clean, organized, and silent. Recently, Jonathan had been looking for a new housekeeper. His previous one had left suddenly, and the mansion felt empty without someone to care for it. But Jonathan was not just looking for any housekeeper. He wanted someone honest and hard-working. Someone who could manage the large house with care. And, most importantly, someone he could trust. After interviewing many people, Jonathan finally hired a woman named Delilah. She was quiet and respectful, with a gentle smile. She came to work with her 17-year-old daughter, Amara. Jonathan noticed Amara the first time she walked in. She was shy and kept her head down. But what caught his attention was the small sketchbook she held tightly in her hands. Amara did not say much. She stayed close to her mother and followed her every instruction. Jonathan had seen many people come and go in his life. But he noticed that Amara seemed different. She looked around the mansion with quiet eyes, as if trying to understand the secrets it held. Days passed, and Jonathan watched how Delilah worked. She was careful and respectful, cleaning every corner of the house. But Amara, on the other hand, spent most of her time alone. She would sit near the windows, watching the garden or quietly drawing in her sketchbook. Jonathan's curiosity grew. Who was this girl? Why did she never talk to him or the other staff? He had asked Delilah once about her, but she only smiled and said, "Amara is a quiet child. She loves to draw and learn." One afternoon, Jonathan was working late in his office. He noticed Amara standing near the door, looking at the bookshelves. She didn't notice him at first. But when she saw Jonathan, she quickly turned and left. Jonathan felt a strange feeling in his chest. He didn't know why, but he wanted to know more about her. Was she hiding something? Was she afraid? Or was she just a normal girl like any other? That night, Jonathan could not sleep. His mind was full of questions. He had trusted many people before, but some had lied or taken advantage of him. His world was built on control, and he did not want to lose it again. The next day, Jonathan decided to test Amara. He wanted to see what she did when she thought no one was watching. So, he came home early from a business trip. He planned to hide in his lounge chair and pretend to be asleep. He thought he could watch Amara quietly and see if she was honest. Jonathan waited patiently in the dark room. Hours passed, and the house was silent. He heard footsteps softly approaching. It was Amara. She walked slowly into the room, her eyes wide and careful. Jonathan held his breath. Amara stopped near the desk. She looked around nervously, then reached into her bag. Jonathan's heart beat faster. Was she going to steal something? But instead of taking anything, Amara took out a pencil and opened her sketchbook. She began to draw. The lines on the paper moved smoothly as she sketched the room, the furniture, and even the small details Jonathan had never noticed. Jonathan watched quietly. He saw the care in her movements and the way her eyes shined with passion. She was not a thief. She was an artist. After a few minutes, Amara closed her sketchbook and left the room softly. Jonathan stayed still, feeling something new inside him, a feeling he had not known in a long time. It was hope. The next morning, Jonathan could not stop thinking about what he had seen. Amara was not just a quiet girl. She had a gift. And maybe, just maybe, she deserved a chance to show it to the world. But for now, Jonathan kept his secret. He waited to see what would happen next. The morning sun poured through the tall windows of Jonathan Blake's mansion, casting long beams of light across the polished floors. Jonathan sat quietly in his study, his mind still replaying the strange scene from the night before. Amara, the quiet maid's daughter, had not stolen anything. Instead, she had sketched his room with a care and passion that surprised him. But still, Jonathan could not shake the feeling that he needed to understand more. He was a man who trusted little, and this girl who rarely spoke and always seemed cautious made him uneasy. Was her silence hiding something deeper? Jonathan watched her and Delilah closely for the next few days. Delilah worked hard, sweeping the floors, polishing the furniture, and preparing meals with care. She greeted Jonathan politely but kept her distance, never asking personal questions. Jonathan liked her for that. Respect was something he valued highly. Amara, however, was harder to read. She was always polite when Jonathan spoke to her, but she rarely looked him in the eye. Instead, she spent most of her time drawing. Sometimes, Jonathan would find her sitting quietly by the window, pencil moving swiftly over paper. Other times, she disappeared into quiet corners of the mansion, sketchbook in hand. Jonathan's curiosity grew, but so did his suspicion. Why did Amara keep to herself so much? Why did she seem so careful, almost like she was afraid? One afternoon, Jonathan decided to test her again. He told Delilah that he was going away for the day on business, a trip he had already cancelled. He wanted to see what Amara would do if she thought no one was watching. He watched from a hidden corner of the house as Amara moved about the rooms. She did not try to sneak or hide. Instead, she moved with a gentle confidence, as if she belonged there. Jonathan saw her stop in the library, where she picked up a dusty book and flipped through the pages quickly. Curious, Jonathan stepped closer and saw that the book was about famous artists, painters, sculptors, and designers. Amara's eyes lit up as she looked at the pictures, and Jonathan noticed that she had folded one page carefully, as if she wanted to remember something important. Jonathan's heart softened a little. This girl loved art, just like his late wife had. For a moment, he felt a connection to Amara, even though he rarely showed his emotions. But then, as he watched, Amara suddenly froze. She glanced toward the hallway, and Jonathan realized she had heard footsteps. Quickly, she closed the book and slipped it back onto the shelf. Jonathan held his breath as a young man walked into the room. It was Mark, the mansion's security guard. Mark was friendly with everyone, but he was strict about rules. Jonathan had told him to watch the house carefully. Mark looked at Amara suspiciously. "What are you doing here?" he asked in a low voice. Amara's eyes widened, and she whispered, "Just looking at books." Mark frowned but didn't say more. He walked away, and Amara let out a soft sigh of relief. Jonathan watched the whole scene with interest. He realized that Amara was not used to being trusted. She was careful because she feared punishment or rejection. Later that evening, Jonathan called Delilah to his office. He wanted to speak with her privately. "Delilah," Jonathan began, "I have been watching your daughter. She is talented, but she is very quiet. Why does she stay away from everyone?" Delilah smiled sadly. "Amara has always been shy, sir. We don't have much money, and sometimes people look down on us. She learned to keep to herself to avoid trouble." Jonathan nodded slowly. He understood now. Amara was not just quiet because she was shy, she was protecting herself from the world. "I want to help her," Jonathan said quietly. Delilah looked at him, surprised. "Thank you, sir. That means a lot to us." Jonathan smiled for the first time in days. "I want to see her drawings. Maybe I can help her grow." The next morning, Jonathan asked Amara to bring her sketchbook to his office. She was nervous but obeyed without hesitation. When she handed him the book, Jonathan flipped through the pages slowly. The drawings were beautiful, full of detail, emotion, and imagination. He saw sketches of the mansion, the garden, and people's faces. But more than that, he saw Amara's heart in every line. Jonathan was amazed. He had never met a young artist like her before. "Amara," he said gently, "your drawings are very good. Have you ever thought about going to art school?" Amara looked down. "I wish I could, sir. But we don't have the money." Jonathan leaned forward. "What if I told you I could help with that? That I could arrange for you to learn and improve your skills?" Amara's eyes filled with tears. She looked up at Jonathan, surprised and hopeful. Jonathan smiled again. "I want you to have a chance. You have a gift, and it should not be hidden." For the first time in a long time, Jonathan felt something warm inside. He was not just a businessman or a billionaire, he was someone who could change a life. Amara's life was about to change, too. But neither of them knew just how much. As days passed, Jonathan watched Amara grow more confident. She still kept her distance, but now she looked at him with respect and gratitude. Jonathan had started a journey, one that would teach him as much about kindness as it would teach Amara about art. And all because he had dared to pretend to sleep and watch quietly. The mansion was quiet in the late afternoon. Outside, the sun was beginning to dip behind the trees, casting long shadows across the gardens. Inside, the house was filled with soft sounds: the ticking of clocks, the gentle hum of the air conditioner, and the faint scratching of pencil on paper. Jonathan Blake sat alone in his study, lost in thought. The day's meetings and calls were long over, but his mind was far from resting. Since discovering Amara's drawings, he found himself thinking about her more and more. What had started as suspicion was slowly turning into curiosity and maybe even admiration. He glanced at the clock. It was nearly 5 o'clock. Usually, at this time, Amara would be helping her mother with chores or finishing her homework in the kitchen. But lately, Jonathan noticed that she often disappeared for long stretches, her whereabouts unknown. A strange feeling stirred inside him, a mixture of concern and wonder. What was Amara doing during those quiet moments alone? Jonathan closed his laptop and decided to find out. He stood up and walked quietly down the hall toward the main living room. He wanted to see where Amara was without being noticed. As he approached the large French doors that opened to the garden, he heard a faint noise, soft tapping, like the sound of pencil on paper. Jonathan's curiosity grew. He stepped closer and peeked inside the sunroom. The room was filled with warm light from the large windows, and there, sitting on a low chair by the window, was Amara. She did not see him at first. She was completely focused on her sketchbook, her pencil moving quickly and skillfully. Her eyes were wide with concentration, and there was a peacefulness in her face that Jonathan had never seen before. The drawing she was working on was beautiful. Jonathan could see the lines taking shape: trees from the garden, delicate flowers, and even the outline of the mansion itself. But what surprised him most was the emotion in her work. It was as if she was telling a story with every stroke of her pencil. Jonathan felt his heart soften. Here was a young girl who had so much talent and yet so little confidence. She was expressing herself in a way that words never could. He took a careful step forward, but suddenly, a creaking floorboard made a sound. Amara's head snapped up. She looked around, eyes wide and frightened. Jonathan froze, not wanting to scare her. But Amara spotted him immediately. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Amara's cheeks flushed red. She closed her sketchbook tightly and stood up quickly. I didn't know anyone was here," she said softly. Jonathan smiled gently. "I didn't mean to surprise you. I just wanted to see your drawing." Amara looked down at her feet, unsure what to say. Jonathan took a step closer. "May I see it?" After a moment of hesitation, Amara handed him the sketchbook. Jonathan opened it to the page she had been working on. The drawing was breathtaking. The garden looked alive with flowers and trees, and the mansion stood proudly in the background. But beyond the beauty of the scene, Jonathan could feel the love and hope in every line. You have a real gift, Amara, Jonathan said quietly. This is more than just a drawing. It tells a story. Amara smiled shyly, her eyes shining with pride. I like to draw things I see and feel. It helps me forget worries. Jonathan nodded, understanding her feelings. I understand. Art can be a kind of magic. It lets us say things we can't always speak. For a few moments, they stood together in silence, sharing a quiet connection. Then, Jonathan spoke again. Amara, I want you to know that your talent is special. And it should not be hidden away. Amara looked up, surprise and hope mixing in her eyes. Jonathan continued, if you want, I can help you learn more. There are teachers and schools that can help you grow as an artist. Amara's voice trembled as she answered. I don't know if I can. We don't have money for that. Jonathan smiled warmly. We will find a way. Talent like yours deserves a chance. Amara's face lit up with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. Thank you, sir. Jonathan felt a new sense of purpose. Helping Amara was not just about art, it was about giving someone a chance to believe in themselves. Over the next few days, Jonathan watched Amara in a new light. She still kept her distance, but there was a quiet strength growing inside her. She spent more time drawing, sometimes sharing her work with him. Each sketch showed more confidence and emotion. One evening, Jonathan found Amara sitting by the fireplace, drawing a portrait of a woman he recognized immediately. It was his late wife. The sketch captured her gentle smile and kind eyes perfectly. Jonathan's throat tightened. He had missed his wife deeply since she passed away years ago. Seeing Amara's drawing was like a small piece of her had returned to him. Your mother told me about your art, Jonathan said softly. I see now why. Amara looked up. Your wife was very kind, sir. I wish I had met her. Jonathan smiled sadly. She believed in beauty and kindness in the world. Maybe you do too. Amara nodded. I want to learn, to be better. Jonathan stood and placed a hand on her shoulder. Then we will make sure you get that chance. That night, Jonathan lay awake in his room. He thought about the day's events and the strange feeling inside him. Amara was no longer just the maid's quiet daughter. She was someone special, a spark of hope in a lonely mansion. Jonathan realized that sometimes, the greatest discoveries come not from business deals or money, but from seeing the hidden talents in others. And for the first time in a long while, Jonathan felt truly awake. Days passed quietly in Jonathan Blake's mansion, but inside Jonathan's heart, something was stirring. The discovery of Amara's talent had opened a door he didn't know existed, one filled with hope, memories, and an unexpected warmth. Jonathan found himself drawn to the sketchbook Amara had left on his desk that morning. He flipped through the pages carefully, admiring each drawing. There was a peacefulness in her art, but also a depth that spoke of dreams and struggles. As he turned the pages, one drawing caught his eye, a delicate portrait of a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. Jonathan's breath caught. The woman looked just like his late wife, Emily. For a long moment, Jonathan stared at the portrait. It was as if Emily had returned to life through Amara's pencil. Emily had been the light in Jonathan's world. She was kind, creative, and full of love. But she had passed away suddenly 3 years ago, leaving a quiet emptiness behind. Since then, Jonathan had buried himself in work, closing his heart to pain. Seeing Emily's face again in Amara's drawing stirred something deep inside him, a mixture of sorrow and comfort. That afternoon, Jonathan asked Amara to come to his study. When she arrived, she looked nervous but curious. Amara, Jonathan began softly, I saw your drawing of the woman. She reminds me of someone very special. Amara looked at him closely, then nodded. Your wife? I wanted to draw her because she seems kind. Jonathan smiled gently. She was the kindest person I knew. For a moment, they sat quietly, sharing a silence filled with unspoken emotions. Jonathan continued, "Your art has something very rare. It can touch hearts." Amara looked down shyly. "I don't know if I'm good enough." Jonathan shook his head. "You are better than you realize. Your drawings show feelings that words cannot express." Amara's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, sir." Jonathan felt a sudden urge to do more. He wanted to help Amara, not just as a business decision, but because he believed in her. "Amara," he said, "would you like to learn more about art? I can find a teacher for you." Amara's face lit up with hope. "Really? That would be wonderful." Jonathan smiled. "It will be a new journey for both of us." Meanwhile, Delilah watched the changing atmosphere in the mansion with gratitude. She had worked hard to provide a better life for Amara, but opportunities had always been limited. Jonathan's kindness was a blessing she never expected. One evening, Jonathan found himself in the garden, where Amara was sitting quietly under a large oak tree. She was drawing the flowers with focused care. Jonathan sat beside her. "Your art reminds me of Emily's love for nature." Amara smiled. "I wish I could know her." Jonathan nodded. "She would have loved your work." As they talked, Jonathan realized that Amara was not just an artist but also a healer of memories, wounds, and loneliness. Jonathan felt his heart open in ways he hadn't since Emily's passing. Amara's presence brought light to the mansion's quiet halls and to his guarded soul. That night, Jonathan lay awake thinking about the future. He knew the road ahead would have challenges, but he was ready to face them. For the first time in years, Jonathan believed in hope again. And it all began with a simple drawing. The days turned into weeks, and the quiet mansion buzzed with a new energy. Jonathan Blake, the billionaire who once kept everyone at a distance, was slowly opening his heart. Amara, the shy maid's daughter, was blossoming under his quiet support. Yet, despite the growing trust, there was still a wall between them, a wall built from years of fear and uncertainty. One afternoon, Jonathan called Amara and her mother, Delilah, to his study. The room was warm, lit softly by the afternoon sun filtering through the tall windows. Amara's heart beat fast as she followed her mother inside. Jonathan sat behind his large oak desk and smiled kindly. "Amara, I've seen your drawings, and I'm very impressed. You have a real talent." Amara looked down, feeling shy but proud. Jonathan continued, "I want to help you grow. There are schools and teachers who can guide you. But before that, I have to ask you something." Amara looked up, curious and a little nervous. "Why haven't you shown your art to others before?" Jonathan asked gently. "Your talent deserves to be seen." Amara's cheeks flushed. She hesitated, then whispered, "Because people don't think a maid's daughter can be an artist. They don't care about what I do." Delilah's eyes filled with tears, but she stayed silent, proud of her daughter's honesty. Jonathan's heart tightened. He thought of all the people who had judged Amara unfairly. It was a cruel world, but he was determined to change that for her. "Amara," he said softly, "you are more than where you come from. Your talent and your heart matter." Amara's eyes shone with hope. Jonathan paused and then asked, "Have you ever been to an art school or had a teacher?" Amara shook her head. "No, sir. We can't afford it." Jonathan smiled. "Then I will arrange for you to have lessons. You will study with the best teachers, and you will have everything you need." Amara's mouth opened in surprise. "Really? But why would you do that for me?" Jonathan looked at her seriously. "Because I believe in you. And because I want to honor my wife's memory by helping young talents like you." Amara felt tears in her eyes. She had never dreamed that someone like Jonathan Blake would believe in her. Before she could say anything, Jonathan's phone rang. He excused himself and stepped away to answer. Delilah turned to Amara and whispered, "This is a big chance for you, Amara. You must be brave. Amara nodded, feeling both nervous and excited. Jonathan returned after a few minutes, his face serious. There's something else we need to discuss. He looked at Amara. Before we move forward, I need to know if you are willing to work hard. This won't be easy. Amara's eyes sparkled with determination. I'm ready. Jonathan smiled. Good. We will start soon. But just as hope filled the room, Amara's expression changed. She looked down, her voice barely a whisper. I'm afraid. What if I fail? Jonathan leaned forward. Fear is normal. But you must remember, every great artist started with a step. You will have my support. Amara nodded, feeling courage grow inside her. Later that day, Jonathan watched Amara leave the mansion with her mother. For the first time, he saw her not as the quiet maid's daughter, but as a young woman full of dreams and promise. But deep inside, Jonathan knew the real test was still ahead, not just for Amara, but for himself. Could he truly help her break free from the limits the world had placed on her? The answer would come in time. The morning sun shone brightly through the tall windows of Jonathan Blake's mansion. The air was filled with a fresh promise, a new beginning not only for Amara but also for Jonathan himself. Today was an important day. It was the day Amara's journey toward her dream of becoming an artist would officially begin. Jonathan had arranged for a private art teacher to come to the mansion. The teacher, Miss Clara Evans, was a kind woman with a gentle voice and years of experience teaching young artists. Amara woke up early that morning. Her heart beat faster with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She had never had a teacher before, and the idea both thrilled and scared her. Delilah packed a small bag for Amara with some pencils, erasers, and a sketchbook. Remember, Amara, this is your chance. Do your best, she said softly, squeezing her daughter's hand. Amara nodded. I will, Mom. When the clock struck 10, a soft knock came at the door. Jonathan opened it to reveal Miss Evans. She smiled warmly and stepped inside. Good morning, Amara, Miss Evans said kindly. I've heard wonderful things about your talent. Amara felt shy but managed to smile back. Jonathan introduced them. Miss Evans will help Amara develop her skills and guide her every step of the way. Miss Evans nodded. Art is about expressing yourself, Amara. It's not just about drawing well but about telling your story. The first lesson began in the sunroom where Amara often sketched. The room was filled with soft sunlight, making it the perfect place for creativity. Miss Evans gave Amara a simple task to draw the garden outside. Amara held her pencil tightly and began to work, her eyes flicking between the garden and her paper. Jonathan watched quietly from the doorway, feeling a mix of pride and hope. He saw the concentration on Amara's face and the way her hands moved carefully. After some time, Miss Evans gently pointed out ways to improve the drawing. Try to notice the shadows and light. It will bring your work to life, she explained. Amara listened carefully and tried again. Slowly, the drawing became more detailed, more real. Miss Evans smiled. You have a natural gift, Amara. With practice, you will be amazing. Amara's confidence grew with every word. For the first time, she felt that her dreams were not so far away. Jonathan spoke softly, remember, Amara, this is just the beginning. There will be challenges, but you are not alone. The days that followed were filled with lessons, practice, and discovery. Amara worked hard, sometimes struggling but always determined. Miss Evans was patient and encouraging. Delilah watched her daughter's transformation with tears of joy. She is growing, Delilah said quietly to Jonathan. Not just as an artist, but as a person. Jonathan nodded. She has found her light. One afternoon, after a long lesson, Amara sat quietly in the sunroom, sketchbook in her lap. Jonathan approached and sat beside her. Amara, he said, have you thought about what you want to do in the future? Amara looked up. I want to be an artist who inspires others. I want to show that no matter where you come from, you can achieve your dreams. Jonathan smiled proudly. That is a powerful dream. Amara looked around the mansion she had known all her life, but now it felt different, full of possibility. Jonathan realized that helping Amara was also helping himself heal. Her courage and talent reminded him of the kindness and hope he once believed in. That evening, as the sun set, Jonathan stood by the window, watching Amara and Delilah walk through the garden. For the first time, he felt that his lonely world was changing. And it was all because of a quiet girl with a sketchbook and a dream. Months had passed since Jonathan Blake had first noticed Amara's drawings. The once quiet and shy girl had grown into a confident young artist, full of hope and dreams. The mansion, which had been filled with silence and loneliness, now echoed with laughter, conversations, and the soft sound of pencils moving across paper. Jonathan watched Amara carefully from across the room as she worked on her latest drawing. It was a beautiful scene of the garden at sunset, painted with colors that seemed to glow. Her skill had grown beyond anything he had imagined. Amara, Jonathan said, standing beside her, your work is truly amazing. You've come so far. Amara looked up and smiled warmly. Thank you, sir. I couldn't have done it without your help. Jonathan shook his head gently. No, you did this yourself. I only gave you a chance. The hard work was yours. Amara's eyes sparkled. I want to keep going. Maybe one day, I can have an exhibition and show my art to the world. Jonathan smiled. I believe you will. Delilah, standing nearby, wiped a tear from her cheek. I'm so proud of you, Amara. Jonathan looked at them both and felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Helping Amara had changed more than her life, it had changed his. One evening, Jonathan invited some important guests to the mansion for a small gathering. Among them were art teachers, local artists, and a few people interested in supporting young talent. Jonathan wanted to introduce Amara to this new world. Amara was nervous but determined. She had never been to such an event, and the idea of showing her art to strangers made her heart race. As the guests arrived, Jonathan introduced Amara to each one. They admired her drawings and asked questions about her journey. Amara answered with quiet confidence, her eyes shining. At one point, Jonathan stood before the guests. I want to share a story about talent, hope, and second chances. Amara is a young artist with a gift that deserves to be seen. With support and courage, she has grown beyond her fears. The room filled with applause. Amara felt a warmth spread through her chest. She realized that this was more than just an event, it was the start of her new life. After the gathering, Jonathan and Amara walked through the garden together. Thank you for believing in me, Amara said softly. Jonathan looked at her kindly. Thank you for reminding me what truly matters. The mansion stood quietly around them, no longer just a house of wealth, but a home filled with dreams and possibilities. Jonathan knew there would be challenges ahead, but he was ready. With Amara's courage and talent, and his own heart opening again, the future looked bright. Amara smiled as she looked at the stars above. For the first time, she felt free to dream, to create, and to become whoever she wanted to be. And that was the greatest gift of all.